Hey, History on the Rocks podcast listeners. This episode is sponsored by the Art of Manliness podcast. If you're sick of having to wade through 2 hours of fluff in order to get a few good takeaways, tune into the Art of Manliness podcast. They glean and distill the very best insights from the world's experts in self-improvement, philosophy, practical skills, history, and more, and do so in under an hour without all that eye-roll-inducing filler. You'll walk away from every episode of the Art of Manliness podcast with actionable insights you can start implementing today to improve your life. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other podcast players. That's good. All right. Welcome, everyone, to episode 5 of the History on the Rocks podcast. This is your host, Cody, and joining me, of course, my lovely wife, Audrey.
Hello.
So what were you going to say to everyone about, how this was supposed to be my podcast, and now
it's become ours.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. There's even a picture of you on the website.
Oh,
Under
really?
The host and you're holding Kennedy. It's a cute picture.
Nice. I love hearing her little laugh.
Yeah, her little laugh at the
my
end.
favorite.
I know. I don't know if many people pick up on that, but
it is actually her laugh.
it is actually her laugh. Yeah, people. There is someone asked. I forgot who it was, but someone was like, "Did you just put a baby's laugh?" And I'm like, "No, I put the microphone in front of her face when she was laying on the ground in our basement, and she laughed like that." And I was like,
perfect.
I'm gonna add that to the podcast. A little piece of Kennedy.
Yes.
What are you drinking?
Oh gosh, what did I get? The Blount Brothers. I haven't tried it yet. I haven't taken a sip.
You took a sip of mine though. What was that, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah,
When I
think.
Or was that last week when I was drinking Blount Brothers and you asked to take a sip of it? Was that during Pirate Queens? No, because I was drinking Buffalo Trace last week. So it was
2 weeks ago.
It was 2 weeks ago.
Let me take a sip.
Go ahead.
I'll
Taste
let
it
you
for
know.
yourself again 2 weeks later.
It's good.
Yeah.
I like it. It's smooth.
Blount Brothers out of Galena, local Illinois distillery. Yeah, it's smooth. I mean, it's easy to drink.
I like it.
You put a lot of that down.
Mm-hmm. There's that other bottle up there that we haven't opened yet. I think we got it for Christmas.
Yeah, it's like Glen something. It's a bourbon, I believe.
Yeah. Maybe next week we'll have to try that one.
Next week, maybe. Yeah. Whenever something says Glen on it, I immediately think like Scotch.
Yeah. I was thinking the same exact thing.
But it's not because it says American whiskey on it. So I wonder if it's
what is that?
What is what?
That Scotch that
Like Glenlivet?
Glenlivet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Glenlivet has like 5-year, 8-year, 12-year, 15-year, 20-year, 100. I don't even know. Glenlivet has a lot.
We're not Scotch people.
No, it's a little too dry for me.
Yeah. It's got
too
much of a bite.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah, it's all good.
Bourbon whiskey. Stick with it.
I'm being boring again. I'm just drinking Jack and ginger ale. I don't know. I've been drinking last week I drank, I think. I don't know. I think I'm phasing myself out of drinking.
Yeah, that happens when you become a parent.
Yeah, it does. It does. But I've also been working out and stuff again, so I don't want to deplete my progress so much. So mentally in my head, keeping it positive, I'm like, no, I don't want to drink because I don't want to deplete all the work I've put in to working out and gaining strength back and stuff and losing some of this, belly weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't want to get that beer belly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had a couple Busch Lights, but that's what I need to start drinking on this.
Busch Light.
Absolutely. Let the people know what the real American beer is.
Okay.
None of this Miller Lite, Bud Light stuff. It's all about the Busch.
I mean, ever since I had Kennedy, I'm definitely more a fan of some beers, not Busch Light. or a Coors Light or that kind of stuff.
You've been drinking a lot of Stella.
Like Stella?
You had Stella today.
Blue Moon.
I drank Guinness today because we're recording this on St. Patty's Day weekend.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's pretty apparent that we don't record these like the night before and just put them out. Like there's a lot of work that goes into editing and stuff. So
yeah, you do a lot of work with editing.
It's no secret that we're recording this way prior, but it is St. Patty's Day weekend as we're recording this, even though the episode comes out, it's Thursday morning while you're listening. And also don't forget, Friday we launched, I did it by myself, but the shorts, the history shots, I enjoyed doing it. Just some short stories of, last week was World Wars, and I'll just keep some themes up and going to give a little bit of extra content. One thing I'm considering doing is subscriptions in the future. If anyone wants to, help support the podcast in a financial way, it helps us with, advertising and getting it out there so we can bring more content and better stuff to our listeners. And I'm hoping to get some, T-shirts and stickers in soon.
Merch.
Some merch, yeah. Just to kind of get the word out. Working on a lot of sponsorships right now. A lot of people I'm talking to online. So really hoping that we can get some, some things going. Because I like doing this every week. It's fun. It gets me out of, just my teaching role. I actually enjoy like doing the research and learning new things.
And you have the time right now because you have a student teacher.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to tell people that. Like literally, you're supposed to say, Cody works his ass off and goes to work every day.
Well, I mean,
and then he goes to coach.
Go to work
then
every
he goes
day.
to coach baseball, and then he has to be a dad, and then he puts this amazing podcast together.
Yes.
And edits it.
It would be crazy where your time would go, though, if you didn't have a student teacher.
I just wouldn't sleep as much.
Yeah.
Instead of getting 4 hours of sleep, I would get 2 hours of sleep.
Oh, gosh, yeah, that's no fun.
All right. Let's dive into this. All right, episode 5. We're talking about the forgotten pyramids of the Sudan. So let's do some word association.
Mm-hmm.
Sphinx.
Egypt.
Pharaohs.
Egypt.
Pyramids.
Egypt.
Exactly. Everything
All
comes back to
Egypt.
Egypt. Everyone thinks Egypt. And it's really funny because Egypt is not like perceived as like an African country. It's more perceived as like a Middle Eastern country.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I didn't really think about like where Egypt is located.
Right.
And that it is in Africa.
I feel like when a lot of people think of Egypt, they're like, they go straight to the Middle East and then they look at a map and they're like, no, it's actually an African country, not an East Asian country.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because of that like strong Muslim influence that it fits into the culture of the Middle East. So, and it's very active in Middle Eastern politics. Unlike a lot of those African countries like Ethiopia and the Sudan that sit right there in that same region. But that's what we're talking about today. If you take a look at historyontherockspodcast.com while you're listening to this, you can head over to your browser, head over to our website, go to the episode page, and click on episode 5, the Pyramids of Sudan. You'll be able to see the images of the pyramids we're going to be talking about today and a few very helpful maps that are going to give you the mindset of where we are geographically in the world and what we're talking about. But you're right. Egypt is the most famous archaeological site for the pyramids. And there's a vast amount of information about the Egyptians and the use of these structures as their temples, their burial sites. They're very intricate. There's even conspiracies of how they were built because they're so large and the stones are so heavy. However, there is another civilization in which their pyramids have mostly been forgotten by archaeologists, scholars, historians, and the public. These pyramids sit further south of Egypt in the Sudan of Eastern Africa. Now, there's 3 major sites to the Sudan where these pyramids lie. The first is El Kuru, the second is Gebel Barkal, and the third is Meroe. And Meroe is the site that we're pretty much going to focus on today because there's a lot of information on Meroe from archaeologists and the different cemeteries that are there. But we also have to ask ourselves, like, who built these pyramids and why did they build these pyramids? We're also getting to the how. We go, okay, the Egyptians built their pyramids, but now there's another civilization that's just as old down in the Sudan, just below them, that also have taken their inspiration of this giant structure and made it their own. So when we study ancient civilizations, we talk about the Inca, Aztecs, Olmecs, and Mayans of Latin America. You learn those in high school, even middle school. You might even learn about them in elementary school, the Mayans at least a little bit. You think about the Egyptians, Mesopotamia, Babylon. However, the continent of Africa is massively overlooked when we think of first civilizations.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, mankind goes far back. I mean, obviously not as far back as the age of the world in general, of Earth. But for human civilizations and how far we've come just in the last 200 years, we have to remember that mankind goes back thousands, hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah, so many
and
years
Africa is really where it started. But yet today, Africa is a very overlooked continent when we talk about, civilizations and geography and its history. Whenever we talk about Africa, we're always talking about the negative stuff. We're talking about the genocides, and we're talking about humanitarian crises and refugees and all this stuff. But no one ever really looks back and goes, who lived in Africa before?
Yeah.
And who are these people? And where
it all started.
What did they do? What did they do in history that's so important? And that's why I wanted to highlight this episode, because I want to talk about the Nubians. Nubia is one of those civilizations that has been forgotten about in history. And there's many people online, many historians, many scholars that are African focused, right? They're African geographically focused on their history. And so they talk about the Nubians and the civilization. However, in public school, you'll never hear about these people.
No, I can't recall.
I taught world geography for 1 year. I teach AP human geography now. And this is not a civilization that we talk about in public school.
Do you go back really far in AP Human Geography?
It depends.
Or where do you start?
See, AP is a little different because human geography, we mostly talk about current events and what's more applicable to the kids today in the world that they live in. But so I guess I should focus more on world geography because the only world geography in that region that we talk about is mostly the Egyptians.
Okay. Is that new class, that Great Civilization, is that going to go back to maybe around these times?
I'd have to ask Sabrina about that because Sabrina is one of my coworkers and colleagues. Shout out to Sabrina. I know she listens to the podcast. And she has revamped this course, and I'd have to ask her because I really don't know what
the curriculum is,
what it all entails. So maybe this is idea for the future when she gets it up and running, because next year will be the first year that she actually implements it. So.
There's a decent amount of interest in it, or at least for the juniors.
That's great to hear, though. So who are the Nubians, and how did this civilization even come to be? So again, there's maps on the website under the episode 5 that you can follow along with right now to kind of give yourself an idea of where we're talking about. Around 5000 BC, African people started moving east from the Sahara toward the Nile River to the land of Nubia. Over time, people of southern Africa also migrated north into the region, which made Nubia a very diverse African population. Now, I need to stop here already and talk about the continent of Africa in general. Okay. When people look at a political map of Africa today, it's a very large continent.
Yeah.
Our maps are distorted so much because it's hard to put a 3D globe onto a 2D surface. And so Africa looks a lot smaller than it is. However, Africa is a large continent. With the amount of people and the civilizations that started there and then spread out across the globe over history, people look at that map and they see countries like Nigeria, Mali, Tunisia, South Africa, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and they go, oh, these countries have been here, just like the European countries, how we have France, Spain, Germany, England, and that's just not true at all. If you look at a tribal map of Africa, there are thousands of borders between tribes.
So I'm looking at a map, I guess you could call it, of Africa, and it's like all these different countries laid on top of Africa and what can fit in Africa.
Right.
So we have like Spain and Portugal, Belgium, France, the Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, United States, Eastern Europe, India, China, Japan, and India part 2. And it looks like there might be like an island off of Africa that might be still like African territory, which is the UK and Ireland. All of those countries can fit within the continent of Africa.
So what I'm going to show you is the ethnic map of Africa. Now, I'm actually I'll put this up on the website as well so you can understand what I'm talking about. But look at how many ethnicities. So if you were to take all the countries out right now that exist in Africa, okay, and you were to draw it up the way that I'm going to show you this map, this is how Africa would look compared to its ethnic map.
Oh, wow. Can I get a little closer look at that?
Yeah. Like, look at Southern Africa, how small all of those areas are.
There's so many.
Yeah.
I mean, 100.
Now, the northern part is a little bit bigger because that's all desert, and there's not a lot of different ethnicities up there. So, it's the climate that makes those groups so large. But in the middle of Africa and Southern Africa, you see how many different ethnic groups there are living in very close proximity to each other.
So different.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty crazy.
So in AP Human Geography, we call those superimposed boundaries because if you take that map, right, and you put it into the map today, you have 40, 50 different ethnicities that have been now conglomerated into one country because of European colonization. So, for example, the French, Western Africa was very French colonized, right? So let's say a country like Mali, very big in space. If you look at it on the map, it's huge. It's very geometric. It kind of looks like the number 4, like triangular. But there's like 3 or 4 different ethnicities just within that giant region.
Yeah.
And the problem there is after Africa was decolonized from European rule, these ethnicities were forced to live with each other in a superimposed boundary, which is one country.
Yeah.
So this causes civil wars.
Mayhem.
Yeah, it causes big conflict. Civil wars, genocide, because those different groups who are now forced to live amongst each other are fighting for control of one political area. And this is like the problem with Africa is that after European colonization and decolonization, these people were living amongst themselves very peacefully. And then they were forced to live amongst each other under one political unit. And that's why Africa is such a shit show today. And I don't mean that in any disrespect. It's just the reality of the continent. And all of this history of European colonization that has absolutely driven that continent and those countries into an absolute shit show.
Yeah, sounds like it would be with all of those different people.
Yeah. So we were talking about how the people from East Africa moved from the Sahara to the Nile River, and then people from the south of Africa also started to migrate north into the region, which made Nubia that very diverse African population. So you have a lot of tribes moving to one region, and it's because the Nile River is just so fertile, and it's a place where life can happen. So these once herdsmen and hunters gradually shifted in their ways to become farmers and fishermen. They also brought the skill of making pottery to their newly settled land. Farmers grew grains, peas, lentils, dates, and melons. And once being herdsmen, their social status and wealth was so elite by the amount of animals that they owned. This type of life, being a herdsman, when you have animals, usually you're using those animals to, sell milk from the animal, hides, things like that. You can sell the animal in general.
Meat,
yeah. Animals are very prominent in early civilizations because it shows that you have wealth. You have something to trade, right? Because money isn't a thing. You're trading what you have for other things that you don't have. Okay? just to set that up here, because we're going to get into the relationship with the Egyptians in just a minute. These people also mined valuable resources such as gold and carnelian. Their wealth was important for trade to their now northern neighbors, the Egyptians, who bartered with their grain, vegetable oils, wine, beer, linen, and other manufactured goods. So this is really important because the Egyptians as a civilization are so far along that they have so much to offer to the Nubians. And the Nubians have all this wealth because of their herdsman status. They have all these animals to give the Egyptians. Together, the Nubians and Egyptians built a strong economy in the northeastern part of Africa. So you can see how that relationship could be really positive.
Yeah.
There are a couple of places where it is said that the Nubian people get their name. One comes from the Egyptians and their word for gold, which is literally, if you spell it, NWB, which I pronounce as noob. So like Nubian, noob. But that's their word for gold. So it's like the people that brought gold and wealth, right? Those are the Nubians.
And they're noobs.
Jeez, you did that.
Newbies.
You did that. There is a lot of writings about the Nubians in Greek and Roman literature as well. The Greeks, however, use the word Nubades to describe the people belonging to this region in Sudan. So Nubades, Nubians, that's kind of in general how these people got their name.
Interesting. I think it's because they were new to the area. So they're noobs.
Egypt and Nubia had a long, prosperous, and sometimes conflicting relationship with each other. The Egyptians first conquered the Nubians, but as the Egyptian dynasties fell into internal chaos, the Nubians were actually able to break free and become independent of Egypt. The Nubians would turn the table and rule the Egyptians for a while. For about 2,000 years, Nubia was known as the Kush, based on its geographical location below the first cataract of the Nile. The Kushites, as they were called, had developed three powerful kingdoms at Kerma between 2000 and 1650 BC, at Napata between 800 and 270 BC, and Meroe between 270 BC and 370 AD. And like I said, Meroe is what we're going to be talking about mostly when we get into the actual pyramid talk, because it's just more it's more recent than the other two kingdoms. Much of what is known about the Nubians and this relationship has been revealed through archaeological digs, wall art, monuments, and the oral history of those in modern day who are associated with these ancestors. So again, we have a lot of oral history here, just like the pirate episode last week.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. Yeah, it's been passed down through word of mouth, but again, that game of telephone where it's as close as possible to what we know.
Yeah.
Around 200 BC, the Nubians invented a written language called Meroitic, which is still a struggle to decipher today. Only words and phrases can be translated as it is complex. Much of the Meroitic language is found in Greek and Roman literature, as I was talking about earlier, as their empires reached the Nubians' borders after 330 BC. Like I was talking about earlier, the Greeks and the Romans, their empires pretty much came to that border of where the Nubians settled. They traded with them, face to face with them, it's in their literature because they met these people.
Yeah.
This relationship between Nubia and Egypt, however, both friendly and conflicting, led to a share in cultural aspects. One large cultural aspect being the architectural structure of the pyramid. With Egyptian influence, the Kush king Alara decided that pyramids would be used for burial sites. As they ran out of space, succeeding kings moved the burial necropolises to different sites. The downfall of the Kush kingdom came when they were invaded at Meroe by the kingdom of Aksum, which is modern-day Ethiopia. And if you know anything about Ethiopia, they were a very wealthy country for a long time. Like, they even made it through European colonization. It wasn't until World War II that the Italians invaded Ethiopia, because Ethiopia was such a strong economic and militaristic force in history that they were never really conquered. So Ethiopia is very interesting when it comes to African countries and their power in the world. Archaeological exploration of the Nubian pyramids began in the 1800s. Giuseppe Ferlini.
That's Italian.
He is. He's an Italian explorer. He found gold under one of the pyramids in Meroe. As he continued his treasure hunt, he chose to try and trick his competition by taking off the tops of the 40 pyramids he visited. The pyramids have also been torn down by grave robbers and the natural elements, as the pyramids have been truncated. So basically, truncated means like when like Giuseppe Ferlini took the top off, the natural elements of like dust, wind, rain got into these pyramids and eroded them from the inside out.
Yeah. I mean, like, how do you do that? You just climb on top and just start throwing the top down? I mean, I feel like they're made so well, and it would just be real heavy.
Yeah, remember, this is the 1800s, though, so, like, pickaxes and stuff like that, you can pick apart the rock and, literally throw them down the side.
But now aren't they, like, probably heavily guarded?
No.
So they're not damaged?
No.
No?
No.
Oh.
These are not the Great Pyramids of Giza. Again, these are the forgotten pyramids of the Sudan.
Oh, but the ones in Egypt are monitored.
Correct.
Okay.
Which is really funny, you bring that up, too, is because what I hate the most of how Egypt, how they market the pyramids, like, hey, come see the pyramids. They're in the middle of the desert. They're not. They take the picture from, like, the city view out to the desert view. If you were to take the picture from the other way, Cairo is literally, like, 20 kilometers in the background.
Oh, so they're really not that far
they are
out of
right
the city?
There. They are right there. Like, you could stay in a hotel in Cairo
and see them.
And take a car. I mean, yeah, you could see them from your top floor or even like one of the lower floors. They are right outside of Cairo. Oh. They are not in the middle of nowhere. So if anyone did not know that and you're trying to take a trip to Egypt thinking you're going to the middle of nowhere to see the pyramids, they are right outside of Cairo.
I mean, it would still be like really cool to see that, even though like they're in the mid, they're not really in the middle of nowhere. It would be so cool to see.
I would go there in a heartbeat if there wasn't so much conflict right now between the United States and the Middle East.
Yeah.
If a lot of this shit settled down and like we were welcomed into
many years from now.
No, seriously, like, and I mean this like sincerely. If a lot of this would settle down, and we were on good terms with Middle Eastern countries, I would love to go to the Middle East and see just the culture and
for sure
and different things. But right now, it's sketchy to go over there, to be honest. And I'm not trying to be racist or whatever people are going to call me for saying that. It's just the reality that it's not safe right now.
No,
being a white American male or even a white American female to go over to Middle Eastern countries and go explore. It's just not safe.
No, it's not.
And it's just the reality of it. So again,
and it's unfortunate.
Don't cancel me for that.
That it is that way.
It is unfortunate because I would love to experience some of these cultures because I read about them and I research these, and I would love to go to, Egypt safely. I would love to go to see Iran or even Iraq safely just to understand more, because when you see things, you understand the culture more, and that experience opens up your mind to, different ways of life. It gets you out of your U.S. bubble.
Yeah, so for sure.
It's just I'm going on a historian rant right now. I know. I'm going on a historian rant right now because like I would love to visit so many places that I really can't go to without feeling unsafe.
Correct. Yeah. You can't. But maybe one day.
Hopefully one day. Maybe when I retire in 30 years.
Yes. I mean, that's when a lot of people travel, is when they're retired.
Yeah. Well, that was more of a dig to my, our education pensions and shit like that. So.
Yeah, hopefully we won't be dead.
I just went on that rant. But Giuseppe Ferlini, we were talking about, he took down the tops of 40 of those pyramids in Meroe. And the pyramids have also been torn down by those grave robbers we were talking about, natural elements, because being truncated, that's where we left off.
Yes.
the natural elements get, like, rain gets inside, and these are built of sandstone, which we'll get to in a minute. So they're easily eroded. So a lot of these structures have imploded on themselves because of the natural elements and not being protected by that top piece, that capstone. The civil war also that occurred in Sudan also made the pyramids susceptible to damage, making them unrecognizable. So if you were looking at our website right now and looking at the pyramids, you're going to see like images of some of them broken down almost halfway. You'll see a couple that are still intact, but like the Civil War, there's no care for any culture there. Many of the pyramids were destroyed in that region.
Well, and these look like they were actually in the middle of nowhere.
These are. The Sudan is not a very populous place when it comes to like big cities or anything like that. And
just like I feel like maybe this picture doesn't do it justice. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't, but they look a lot smaller than what you perceive those Egyptian ones to be.
And we'll get into that. They are a little bit smaller and designed a little differently. What archaeologists did find in the tombs revealed a large connection to ancient trade routes, artifacts from Rome and as far as China. This is kind of crazy because the things that they were finding in the bottom of these pyramids in the tomb part, and again, we'll get to the structure in a minute, but it shows that these people, the Nubians, had a big trade with people far away from them.
Yeah.
We talk about the Silk Road in history where these are big trade routes between Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, and this must have been part of one because like Rome isn't as far as China, obviously, but still to have like Chinese artifacts in the tombs in Sudan means that these people were very well economically advanced, that they were trading with people outside of Africa. Canopic jars also suggest that Kush kings were mummified just as the Egyptian pharaohs were. In the city of Meroe, there are 3 main necropolises for the royals. Again, check out the maps on our website. You'll be able to see this in more detail. There are southern, western, and northern cemeteries. The royals of the Meroitic dynasty were the first to be buried in the southern cemetery. The non-ruling family members of the royal family were buried in the western cemetery. When the southern cemetery was filled, they opened up the northern cemetery. The western cemetery is the oldest, and other than the non-ruling royal family, residents of Meroe were also buried there. So there's 3 cemeteries that we have here. There's the northern, the southern, and the western cemeteries. I know I just said it really quickly, but again, the southern cemetery was actually the original for the royals. So wherever the kings, when they died, they were buried in that southern cemetery. And then their non-ruling family, so like their extended family, they were buried in the western cemetery, so close to them, but in a different spot. Over time, cemeteries get filled, obviously, with when people die. Yep. That northern cemetery was opened up to continue the tradition of burying royals. So there's 3 different sites within Meroe where these pyramids lie of these royal kings and their families.
Sorry, I'm trying to look where, I had to look at where, like, Sudan and Egypt and how far away really China was. I don't think I realized how far away that is. Sorry.
It's fine. Over 800 graves can be found in the Western Cemetery, in which 171 of them have pyramids atop of them from the Meroitic period. The non-ruling family consists of Meroitic queens, princes, and members of extended family. The Southern Cemetery was originally meant for residents of Meroe. However, around the 8th century BC, it was converted into a royal cemetery. This cemetery has 220 grave sites, with 90 of them having large structures, 24 of those structures confirmed as pyramids. And I say that because, again, 24 confirmed as pyramids, a lot of them are eroded or destroyed. And again, you can see some of these different structures on the website. I have some pictures up there of some of them are circular, which they don't which there's not really an explanation for, but I believe that there is multiple members of families buried under those, kind of like a mausoleum.
Makes sense.
There are non-ruling royals buried there from the Napatan period during its transition into the Meroitic period, when King Archimoniko moved the necropolis to Meroe from Jebel Barkal. The Northern Cemetery, being the most recent site, was first utilized around the 3rd century to bury the queens of the Meroitic kings, who were buried in the Southern Cemetery. So, again, because the kings are rulers, they were buried in that Southern Cemetery. However, their queens are technically not quote-unquote rulers.
Mm-hmm.
They buried them elsewhere in the Northern Cemetery.
Hmm.
The Northern Cemetery was an overflow lot for the Southern Cemetery, so eventually ruling kings would be buried there as well. The Northern Cemetery includes 41 pyramids, and beneath them lie 30 kings, 8 queens, and 3 crown princes.
What about princesses?
Yeah, it didn't say princesses.
Oh, it's unfortunate.
Oh, I'm just giving the facts of what I researched.
I know.
Cody, you're being so sexist. The first queen ruler of the Kush has the largest pyramid, standing around 80 feet high.
I'm trying to think about how high 80 feet is.
And like an 8-story building.
That's pretty tall.
Yeah. Like 80 feet would be 4 times our house.
Yeah. That's really...
Take a 2-story house and stack them on top 4 times.
Yeah.
That's an 80-story building.
That's high.
So the Nubian pyramids were built over hundreds of years. The first was built around 700 BC, which is long after the Great Pyramids of Giza. So again, those Egyptian pyramids have been there long before the Nubians built any pyramids. As Egyptian power dwindled, as we said before, Nubians still kept many of the cultural pieces for themselves. This included worshiping Egyptian gods and keeping up with the original Egyptian traditions. You will notice looking at Nubian pyramids that they are much smaller and steeper than the Egyptian pyramids.
Yeah, that's what I noticed when I was just looking at the picture. Like, yeah, you can obviously tell that they're pyramids, but they're very different from what you see in Egypt.
This is exactly why I say go look at the website, because looking at these images will give you a broader view of what we're talking about right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard over a podcast to describe what they look like. But if you look at the Egyptian pyramids, how perfectly triangular they are, and then look at the Nubian pyramids, they're totally different.
Yeah.
Well, this is because the Nubians used what's called shadoff-based construction, in which a crane was put in the middle of the pyramid and could only stretch so far to stack the stones. Shadoffs were originally designed to lift water out of a canal. So basically what happens is, right, you have this crane that's in the middle, and you're pulling up these rocks. So naturally, the crane can only reach out so far. Its arm can only reach out so far. So the Nubian pyramids are actually they're steeper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they're skinny.
Yeah, they're skinny, but they're tall. They're skinny, tall pyramids compared to like the Egyptian pyramids, which are wide,
really wide, and really, really tall.
Like I didn't look it up, but from what I remember, like the base of the Egyptian pyramids are like 3 football fields long.
Oh gosh, I don't think I realized that they're that big.
They're huge. That's where the conspiracies come in of how did they get these large rocks to be so wide and then build them so tall.
So, oh gosh. The base of the Great Pyramid is a square with each side measuring 230 meters, which is 756 feet, and covering an area of 13 acres, which is nearly 10 football fields could fit within the base.
So 10 football fields could fit within the base, but lengthwise on each side, I was pretty much right. It's about 3 football fields long because you said 700 and something feet.
756 feet. Each side, yeah.
So it's just under 3 football fields widthwise on each side.
Yes, each side. Crazy.
Yeah. Another interesting difference between the Egyptian pyramid and the Nubian pyramid is that there is not a burial chamber inside of the Nubian pyramid like there is the Egyptian.
Oh, they're below it.
Correct. In fact, the Nubian pyramid is more of a giant gravestone over the buried person. It's kind of, It's like putting one of those, like if you go past a cemetery in the United States, right? You see those giant gravestones that are like, I think they're called obelisks, like the big spiky things.
Yes.
I think they're called obelisks. Oh, obelisks are Egyptian shapes.
Hmm.
However, yeah, the people are buried underneath the pyramids, not inside of them, like the Egyptians. Entrances to the crypts are outside of the pyramid and take you underground. So there's a separate entrance that you go down into the crypt that's below the pyramid. You don't enter the pyramid to the crypt like the Egyptian pyramids. Although the pyramids have different structures and physical uses, both Egyptian pyramids and Nubian pyramids seem to be lined up with certain stars and constellations.
I forgot about that part.
I just dropped my papers. You want to know why?
I do.
Because we're going to talk about the conspiracies.
Oh, we like conspiracies.
But you don't like my alien conspiracies.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't.
And that's where I'm going with
this. Oh, crap.
I knew when I wrote this episode that Audrey was going to hate this conversation, and I'm willing to have it because I like talking about it. And again, how are these structures lined up so perfectly with constellations? Like, how are the Great Pyramids of Giza, the three of them, lined up perfectly with the stars in Orion's belt? You explain that to me without modern astrology. Exactly.
Because they saw the stars and then they just made them that way.
You don't just see the stars and make them that way. They are perfectly lined up mathematically with those stars. How does that happen? The Earth is round. They are perfectly lined up with the damn constellation of Orion.
But Orion, it moves.
Oh, everything moves.
So it's perfectly
honestly,
lined up with Orion's belt when?
But you're honestly proving my point. Because, like,
but when
the Earth moves and then the pyramids line up with it at a specific point. I don't freaking know. I'm not an astrologist.
Because when I see Orion's belt outside of our house in the summer, I can't really see it. But when winter comes, it's right there.
I am just saying it is wild that these structures are lined up perfectly with constellations and stars in the sky. Mathematically, you could draw a linear line between the two, and they are fucking... I said fucking. They are fucking light years away from each other.
I don't know, because they made them that way. I don't know how aliens come into play with that.
Because the aliens came down, built the Egyptian pyramids in a perfect mathematical form because they are the only beings that could have done that in their advanced technology all the way back when there was nothing to build those giant structures with. One day, it's going to happen. I'm going to be proven right, and I'm going to say, see, I fucking told you so.
And you know what? That's fine, but I am a realist. I haven't seen it. That's where if I see it, hell yeah, of course I'm going to believe it. But
but in all argument, I'm a realist too, and how do you explain that? How do you explain this in a earthly form that no one helped the Egyptians perfectly align the stars when Galileo and like they didn't discover that the earth revolved around the sun until the Renaissance.
I don't know.
And those are thousands of years apart. Something's not right. Something's just not right. It's just not right.
Just ended up being that way.
Well, I hope for anyone listening that thinks this is a boring topic was entertained by that conversation at least. Because like when I was writing this, I was like, people are going to think this is so boring, but I'm so fascinated by this. But it's just wild. Like, I don't know. There's so much. This isn't a conspiracy podcast. This is a history podcast, so whatever. Moving on. The pyramid structure is made of sandstone from the city of Meroe. Most of the structure is shaped from blocks, but some of the pyramid is also held together with crushed up rubble. Although the structure is sandstone, archaeologists have found that the stones were once plastered with limestone to give them a more royal look. So, just to explain that a little bit, sandstone is very dull. Mm-hmm. It's a very easy building type of stone, but limestone gives it like that shine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It gives it like a shiny outer appeal.
Yes.
The capstones of the pyramids are different based on their geographical location. So we were talking about the capstones earlier that Giuseppe
cut off the top.
Correct. So throughout the different regions of the Nubian empires, there are different shapes for those capstones.
Mm-hmm.
The ones in Meroe, however, have a circular base with 2 holes where it is believed that bronze solar discs were placed. Bronze solar discs.
I don't know, I'm just trying to picture it.
That's great, because I'm
In
going to
my
drop my
head.
papers again and go back to the alien thing. The bronze solar discs are to shine the sun off of them so that the aliens can land right there.
Okay.
I'm stretching on that one. I'm just trying to entertain the listeners with my goofy theories about these things. Now, below the pyramid, which is the gravesite, there are underground structures that include a chapel. The chapel is supposed to be the bridge between the living and dead relatives. Rituals can be performed and prayers that would be sent to the afterlife, to their lost loved one. Many of the chapel setups in Meroe are designed just as the chapels under the pyramids of the Nepitan era, reviving those traditions. In the grave, the person's belongings were put there with them, as well as any offerings from their living relatives. This is also similar to the Egyptian tradition in their ancient pyramids. So just like the pharaohs, when they were buried there, all of their belongings were buried with them until grave robbers
Stole their
came into the
stuff.
pyramids and stole their shit. Yeah. A lot of it is, jewelry, pottery, gold, stuff like that. Very, very expensive items.
Yeah.
Obviously, that grave robbers would want. Around the 4th century, the kingdom in Meroe started to collapse, and new capital cities started to be the focal point of Nubian life. One of the last pyramids was built in the middle of the 4th century, just before Meroe was invaded, ending the kingdom's rule indefinitely. The tradition of burial pyramids lasted over 1,000 years in the Kush region and was eventually abandoned. The pyramids sure give us a historical insight into Nubian culture and tell us more about how this ancient civilization lived. It also gives us the interesting and influential relationship tied back to the Egyptians and how both civilizations had many commonalities.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much it. There's a lot of information on the Nubian civilization. I just wanted to strictly keep it to the pyramids because I think the pyramids are the most interesting part of these 2 civilizations. You have the influence from Egypt and the Great Pyramids of Giza that everyone knows, everyone sees. It's in every freaking travel magazine to go to Egypt and see the pyramids. But I just wanted to highlight the Sudan because, again, this is a country that you're not going to go visit. Not many people are going to go visit because it's so war-torn still, and these civil wars and this unrest keeps occurring there, that it's hard to see these structures safely by traveling there. And I just thought it was an interesting topic to highlight as an African history influence, if that makes sense.
It does. I just want to look up, what's the population of the Sudan? Is it heavily populated?
It's a good question because I have no idea.
45.66 million in 2021.
That's a lot of people.
That is a lot of people.
That's 3.5 times the size of Illinois. Because I think Illinois is about 13 million people.
Yeah, I think. But it's also a lot larger. It's a lot larger of a space.
Yes, but also it is very, the Nubian desert, it's deserted.
Yeah.
Much of the Sudan is desert, is what I'm getting at.
Yes.
Yes, so it's not a lot of livable space.
So then there should be heavily populated areas.
Yeah, correct. And a lot of those areas are along the Nile because you can preserve life there with the natural water flow that happens along the Nile. So also, the interesting part of Africa is religion, right? I showed you this map.
I was very curious.
Yes.
And that's why we started looking at
Audrey
it.
asked me if the Sudan was Muslim. And so I showed her the map of how Africa is broken up north and south between Islam and Christianity. Islam exists largely in the north, and then Christianity largely in the south.
Mm-hmm.
And this also causes a lot of tension, not just politically, but also now religiously in the continent of Africa because of this, and this has to do with, again, European colonization bringing Christianity into the lives of a lot of Africans who were once animists. And just like our Native Americans in the United States, a lot of these tribes, they worshipped nature and their own gods and their own tribal gods.
Yep.
And now they're converted to Christianity or Islam, and those two religions have their own conflicting past.
Yeah. Well, and within Christianity, there's just also so many different sects. Yeah, like I didn't grow up knowing any of that. I did not grow up in the church, so it's kind of foreign to me. With all the different, like, Christianity is the umbrella.
Correct.
And then there's so many, like,
there's Catholicism, there's Methodist, there's Protestant, there's Baptist, like
Lutheran, Episcopalian.
It just goes on and on and on.
And then non-denominational
Christian now.
It's crazy to me. Like, what are the differences between all of them?
It's just different beliefs in how you pretty much interpret the Bible.
Like, I feel like they're probably all so similar, but different at the same time.
Yeah, they're all similar because I think they have the same rooted, goal and belief, but when it comes to some of the extenuating circumstances of Christianity and religion and the Christian religion in general, that there's specifics that are different within each.
Maybe this needs... This should be. Can we make this another podcast?
You want to do the history of religions?
Yeah.
Of Christian religions? Because if
we can make it another, like, part 1, part 2, part 3. But yeah, I think it would be really interesting. I would be willing to learn.
I'm totally fine with that. We can definitely do like a part 1, part 2, part 3.
Because I don't want to get into it now because that's totally besides the point. But
yeah, absolutely. And like, we can look at Christianity. We can look at Islam. We can look at like even Judaism.
Yeah.
Which I think would be a great conversation to have because of the conflict between Israel and Palestine right now.
Yes.
And
that would be, yeah.
And how all three of those major religions, monotheistic religions, like coexist within that one small area.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can definitely do that down the road. Maybe when we drop season 2.
Yeah.
Instead of like common phrases, how we're doing right now in 3 parts.
Yeah.
We can do religion and religious history in 3 different parts.
I would be interested in that.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good one too, and we'll try and keep it as non-biased as possible.
I think I am very non-biased because I have no education within religion.
Yeah, 100%. You are definitely non-biased.
And I mean, even at this point, like, yes, you grew up. We were both baptized Catholic.
Yeah.
You grew up more in the church and did all the.
I am baptized.
I would say
First Communion,
all the stuff
all the way through.
And I was baptized Catholic, and I'm not against religion at all whatsoever. And I've told you this so many times. I don't know.
Sure, yeah. And that's something, and that's a good conversation to have too. Is like, what's the difference between all these? Like, there's even different beliefs within an umbrella of the same belief.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, we'll get into that. Those will be some good historical information episodes of like where these religions are rooted into and how they kind of splinter off. Mm-hmm. Just like how Christianity like splinters off Judaism, and their religious background. So like that would be really interesting. I think that's a great idea, and we'll get into that.
Alrighty.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's episode 5. I again just want to bring something new. To a podcast here. I mean, if you go to any history podcast, you're not going to find a lot of deeper rooted African history. I just want to bring something that people never heard of. Obviously, that's the whole point of our podcast, and dive into a civilization that gets overlooked, and with their similar structures as the pyramids are to Egypt, kind of highlight a different culture.
Yeah, I mean, definitely would have never thought that there were other pyramids other than the Egyptian pyramids.
That was the whole point of this. So thank you all for listening to the History on the Rocks podcast. Don't forget to go check out our Instagram, Facebook, and historyontherockspodcast.com. Again, you can find episode information on there, a lot of the sources that I use to gather this information. If you're interested, you can read more in depth about what we're talking about. Also, like I said, we dropped last week on Friday our shorts called History Shots. Last week was World War themed. Tomorrow, we're going to do U.S. presidents. So another, quick 15, 20-minute episode just with some fun, interesting, quick facts about unknown history that you've probably never heard of before, but hopefully could help you, just like my history buffs out there, in your trivia at the bars. Thank you all for listening again. We appreciate it. Keep supporting, keep sharing with your friends. Like I said, we're going to have some big announcements coming soon with sponsorships, get some merch in, hopefully be able to advertise the show on a larger level. Anything else?
Nope, I think that's it.
All right, well, check out History Shots tomorrow, dropping at 4 p.m. right when you're hopefully getting off work. And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Bye.
Cheers. That's good.